Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is the beach. It's also the perfect place to enjoy the holidays. Here, you get all the holiday cheer you can handle, plus 60 miles of beaches and endless fun. Sometimes you need a holiday from the standard holiday celebration. Maybe you want to escape the cold, or maybe you want to start a new tradition. There are themed shows all over the Grand Strand at storied venues like the Carolina Opry and the Alabama Theater. Winter Wonderland at the beach features massive light displays and a brand new family fun zone. Holiday cheer is everywhere you look, like at Brook Green Gardens' Night of 1,000 Candles, where more than 2,500 candles and twinkling lights take over the grand botanical gardens. There aren't many places where you can celebrate the holidays or ring in the new year with an ocean view. This time of year is great for horseback riding along the shoreline, fishing from chartered boats or in the intracoastal waterways, and golfing at any of the 80-plus award-winning courses. Take a holiday from the average holiday season at the beach. Plan your getaway to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at visitmyrtlebeach.com. On the morning that Julia got laid off, she walked out of the gym and checked her email.
The actual day, I went to my gym. I come out of the gym. It's like 8:30 in the morning. I've just come out of Pilates class. I just checked my phone as I do. And it's like, Stripe HR, your role at Stripe.
That's not a note anyone wants to get. And it was a shock.
There were no rumor mill. There was nothing. Like, I'm telling you, I've been in companies, there usually is some sort of water quote. Like, this was stealth, absolute stealth.
Julia, by the way, is not her real name, but that's what we're calling her today. She knows her way around tech. She's worked at a bunch of the big name companies, including Amazon and Microsoft. And she joined Stripe, the online payment processor, a little over a year ago to work on company partnerships, just before a big expansion.
It was the highest valued privately held company I think it was at that time, it was like 95 billion. It was a rocket ship.
Initially, COVID lockdowns and the subsequent online shopping boom propelled that rocket ship even higher. But then gravity kicked in. Stripe laid off 14% of its workforce earlier this month, including Julia. In a note to employees, the company's founders blamed inflation, rising interest rates, and their own bad business decisions. Julia's worried about her colleagues who were here on work visas. She's already started networking for her next gig. But she's also been around the block enough that she knows that, however brutal, this is what companies sometimes do.
So I don't really take it personally. And if you go to a startup, I guess this is the chance you take. And at that time, not everybody had jumped on the bandwagon, right? As of last Thursday, it wasn't like the entire industry had decided to do this.
But since Julia got laid off, it kind of feels like the whole industry has decided to do this. Tens of thousands of tech workers, including at some of the biggest companies in the industry, have lost their jobs in November alone. So today on the show, we're going to explore why. Because maybe something fundamental is shifting, and tech shouldn't be counting on rocket ships anymore. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. What Next TBD is brought to you by Progressive. What's one thing you'd purchase with a little extra savings? A weighted blanket, smart speaker, that new self-care trend you keep hearing about? Well, Progressive wants to make sure you're getting what you want by helping you save money on car insurance. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. Discounts like having multiple vehicles on your policy. Progressive offers outstanding coverage and award-winning claim service. Day or night, they have customer support 24/7, 365 days a year. When you need them most, they are at their best. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts vary and are not available in all states and situations. It's not just Julia's experience at Stripe, or Elon Musk's, whatever you want to call it, at Twitter.
Winter holiday season is turning out to be the season of layoffs for the tech industry. The latest report, Amazon will be laying off thousands of employees in its corporate and tech divisions.
We'll turn now to the turmoil at Twitter. The social media giant appearing to be in disarray after as many as half of its employees were laid off under new owner Elon Musk.
Facebook's parent company Meta announced that it's cutting more than 11,000 jobs, about 13% of total staff.
Apple shares trading lower this morning after CEO Tim Cook confirmed reports of hiring slowdowns at that company.
By even a conservative estimate, some 40,000 tech workers have been laid off in November. And the website layoffs.fyi says more than 130,000 people have lost their tech jobs globally this year. It's been an ugly fall, in both senses of that word, for an industry that has been going gangbusters for about 2 decades. And I wanted to talk to reporter Timothy B. Lee, who covers tech and economics, because Tim wrote an essay titled The End of Silicon Valley's 20-Year Boom that made me sit up and pay attention.
So you had the first decade of that 20-year boom. You had companies like Google and Facebook that, in retrospect, we know they just straightforwardly were worth a lot more than people expected. And that was just because people weren't really thinking through, how like everybody was going to be on the internet. Search ads and internet advertising was going to be a pretty profitable thing. It was just hard for people to get their minds around how big these tech companies could be. And then you had, for the second decade in the 2010s, you had a bunch of kind of follow-on companies that were more focused on the physical world, your Ubers and Airbnbs and scooter companies and stuff like that. And people were hoping that would have the same kind of growth potential. And the idea was, well, Google and Facebook, that's just bits. And now we're doing atoms, and atoms is much bigger than bits. And so it should be bigger. And so people thought they were getting the same kind of valuation. But yeah, people were just thinking that these companies were going to grow up, going to blow up the way Facebook and Google did. And for the most part, those kind of early ones like Uber and Airbnb did grow, but not as much as people expected. And the later ones like the scooter startups or WeWork, those did not grow at all. And in fact, kind of imploded once it became clear that growth potential wasn't there.
You can think of those later companies, Uber, Airbnb, various scooter startups, drafting off the success of the biggies like Facebook and Google, riding their coattails to get lots of venture capital and spectacular valuations.
You had this ecosystem built up. You have these venture capital firms that just got in the habit of seeing fast-growing, unprofitable companies and saying, oh, this has the potential to become a very profitable business in the future. And that was just what they did. And they had, they were raising money from institutional investors that were used to giving to venture capital. And so I think to some extent, it was just kind of momentum. They were just used to doing that. And so they kept doing it. But the kind of pickings became slimmer and slimmer. And the opportunities weren't as good as they used to be. And it just took a few years for people to really notice how unattractive some of those opportunities were.
I want to talk about what was going on inside these companies in this time period. And when I read your piece, I was reminded of this famous internal memo at Facebook that Andrew Bosworth, known as Boz, wrote in 2016. And it got a lot of flack for basically revealing kind of the underside of a lot of these tech companies. But there's this line that's really telling. And he says, we connect people, period. That's why all the work we do in growth is justified. And you wrote about growth and growth being the mantra in this time period. And I wonder why growth was so important, but also what ingredients are necessary inside, a Facebook or a Twitter to create growth and growth above all else.
To some extent, I think it was just that in 2005 or 2010, there were just a lot of people in the world that weren't on the internet yet, or were not using the internet as much as they would be. And so there was just this big untapped market that had just been created. And the companies that kind of get there first and become the dominant players are going to grow a lot and make a lot of money because they're just exploiting a new market. By 2012, or certainly by 2015 or 2020, that wasn't so true anymore, at least in the developed world. Like pretty much everybody's on the internet, pretty much everybody's using Google, using Facebook. And so it just became much harder to find either new customers or new things for people to do on the internet. And so if you wanted to create a new tech company, you had to kind of steal market share from a different tech company, as opposed to being a first mover in some like big new industry that didn't exist before.
So you've got to still value growth above all else, just find it somewhere different?
If you run an electric utility or a hospital or something, like you'll grow, but you grow about the same rate as the overall economy because, most people already have most services. And so you're trying to come from other companies. So I think tech is just transitioning into a period where it's just kind of a normal company where it's competing with other big companies. And there's just not new customers and new services to roll out as quickly as there was 10 or 20 years ago.
Part of what makes these layoffs so striking, beyond the sheer numbers, is that tech has weathered a lot of storms that really hurt other industries. It came through the financial crisis intact and even thrived during the first 2 years of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there were two things that happened. One is obviously there was a shift to remote work, which then created some opportunities and just caused people to be on their computer more. So I think that did probably extend the growth.
I mean, Facebook hired like 30,000 people.
Yes, absolutely. But then the second thing that happened is the Fed cut interest rates and Congress did a bunch of stimulus. And so you also injected in all this money into the economy that caused the valuations of all the companies to shoot up a lot. And so I think that allowed the kind of interest in investment to accelerate even beyond what the actual growth that was happening, because people saw their investments becoming more profitable. And so you saw, I mean, the most extreme example of this was the meme stops, the GameStops and, crypto and stuff. There was nothing fundamental happening to those businesses that made you think that they were like this huge opportunity. It was just, there was so much money sloshing around that they had to go somewhere, and they went various places, but those places then felt like they were kind of winning at the investing game, as opposed to just kind of being part of this like gusher of money that was coming out of Congress and of the Fed.
When do you think things started to turn?
I mean, I think the Fed raising interest rates in early 2022 was a big factor, because that kind of turned all that stuff I just talked about in reverse, where now there was less money sloshing around the economy. And so investors had to be a little bit more choosy. And so valuations started to fall. And then once valuations started to fall, then tech companies start thinking, well, just this business model of like growing now and worrying about profitability later, that doesn't make much sense anymore if you can't like raise more money to kind of help pay for costs in the meantime. And so, I would say early 2022 is really when this started to change.
Because I guess what I'm trying to tease out here is like, is this the leadership of these companies looking at kind of macroeconomic trends and saying, okay, well, the Fed's tightening, and even though the labor market's still good, there's like a little weaker data. Maybe we should worry about that. Or is there something specific to tech and like where these companies are in their life cycle?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. So absolutely, I think that we were going to have a kind of deceleration of their hiring and their kind of focus on growth, regardless. But the kind of switch from stimulus-driven growth to tightening kind of sharpened that deceleration, where rather than like gradually, slowing hiring, they actually had to do some layoffs. I think that's a big thing to change. And I think one of the things that happens is that when you're a fast-growing company, there's a lot of value in having a deep bench, because if some new market opportunity comes up, you want to be able to throw a bunch of people at it and kind of grab it before one of your competitors do. And so I think a lot of these companies got used to having a lot of extra people around for those kind of things. And particularly, you look at companies like Lyft or like Twitter. Lyft was really trying to become the next Uber. Twitter was trying to become the next Facebook. And so I think they were a little bit overstaffed, because their like aspiration was we were going to be like those bigger guys. And so we want to kind of have all the infrastructure and the talent that they do. And as long as they were growing pretty fast, that was an okay strategy because it helped them grow a little faster.
I think one of the things that's striking is on the way up, doing this was relatively cheap because software doesn't have a lot of overhead.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you think about the probably the most famous example of this, when Facebook acquired Instagram, they had, I think it was 13 people, and they had something like 40 million users at that point. And people thought it was crazy that Facebook was buying a 13-person company for $1 billion. But obviously, we now know like Instagram's a huge thing. We don't know exactly what it'd be worth if it was independent, but it'd be a lot more than $1 billion. I think the early promise of software companies was one programmer could write a line of code that the millions or billions of users could use. And because of that, it should be very profitable because your marginal cost is very low. And therefore you can have a very large scale and make a lot of money. And I think one of the big questions about the industry now is like, kind of what happened to that? Because it's definitely not the case now that look at a company like Twitter. They bring in billions of dollars and seem to really struggle to make a profit. And I've talked to a bunch of engineers and heard different answers in terms of is it that when you reach a certain scale, it stops being cost effective, which that doesn't really make sense to me. Or there are some other costs. Selling ads is expensive, moderation is expensive. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on there. But I think you are going to see tech companies trying to get back to that to some extent to figure out, do we really need to have all these people? Are there more things we can automate or side projects we don't need anymore so that we can get back to this idea that this should be a very cost effective industry?
Just because people are expensive and they come with my health insurance and kind of all the associated costs that a person brings to the table?
Just if you have more programmers, you gotta pay their salary every year, and that's great if they're like doing work that needs to happen. But it should be possible. This should be like a manufacturing tech industry where you get more and more productive over time as you get more efficient, as you figure out how to do more with less. And that's how the economy overall grows, as we figure out how to produce more stuff with fewer people.
There was also this weird thing happening where some of these companies, and I'm thinking of Lyft and Uber, were hugely subsidizing their own services. That's
right. Uber and Lyft in particular, they've really you've probably, if you've used either of those services as a customer, in 2015, it was not only much cheaper, but also much lower weight. I'm doing a reporting project now where I drove for Lyft for a week. And I also did this in 2014. So in 2014, as a driver, I had to wait a long time to get a ride. And I didn't make very much money from the fares because the fares were low, but Lyft would kick in these huge subsidies. I got more from the subsidies than I did from the fares in 2014. Now it's the opposite. They're very little waiting. They're very good at like queuing up your next passenger as soon as you drop the previous one, and the prices are higher, but you get no subsidies. And so I actually think like Uber and Lyft are going to be fine in terms of they're going to be able to get to being a profitable business. I think it's just not going to be quite a bit as big of a business as they were hoping it was going to be. And they're going to probably have to tighten their belts a little bit to, make a profit on the not quite as big amount of revenues that they're going to end up getting.
When we come back, bye-bye, big tech. Hello, boring IT. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds, anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to write anything from a book or screenplay to just a letter. Improve your communication skills with your boss or your family. You can learn how to make a dinner worthy of a Michelin star, or just how to make really good scrambled eggs. With over 150 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. Explore lessons in any order you'd like across your phone, tablet, Apple TV, computer, and on the go with audio mode. Lessons of approximately 10 to 15 minutes in length fit easily into your everyday life. In addition to video lessons, Masterclass provides you with downloadable lesson recaps and supplemental materials. For example, cooking classes come with beautiful downloadable guides that are at the level of a high-end cookbook. Get unlimited access to every class, and as a What Next TBD listener, you get 15% off on an annual membership. Go to masterclass.com/TBD now. That's masterclass.com/TBD for 15% off Masterclass. Have you ever hit a technical snafu while shopping online? Has filling out payment fields given you a headache? Has a mobile banking app ever been down when you wanted to use it? Capital One believes everyone deserves better banking. This means easier access to money and more security. That's why Capital One is investing in machine learning. With machine learning, Capital One can fight fraud faster, improve mobile app experiences, and make online shopping more efficient. Models can quickly detect suspicious activity and alert federal investigators faster. They can also identify how mobile app outages happen through anomaly detection and incident response, so engineers can remedy them quickly. And machine learning also helps Capital One speed up online shopping by making it easier and more secure to use virtual card numbers. The potential of machine learning is so big. See how Capital One is using machine learning to create the future of banking. Search machine learning at Capital One. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Part of what made investors love Silicon Valley and made Silicon Valley self-mythologizing is that everyone was always looking for that next big thing. And if it took off, there was lots of money to be made. Right now, with the more mature tech industry, it's less clear what that next thing might be. Thinking about social media in this moment, like I'm thinking about Facebook in particular, right? First job cuts in 18 years. At their core business, Facebook still makes money. Meta is like, I don't know, trying to do weird things where like you don't have legs or you have fake legs.
Right.
And I just wonder, like, where does it have to go as a company? What's the next thing? I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg is thinking about that, but it does seem from the outside that some of the flyers they took on these next step businesses aren't paying off.
The story of tech over the last 20 years has been exactly, you had PCs and then you had the internet and then you had smartphones and then arguably you had smartwatches. But the CEOs of these companies are used to always looking for the next thing. And so Mark Zuckerberg's doing that. He's going towards the VR and the metaverse. And so far, it's not paying off. I think the jury's still out. I mean, it's very possible that will pay off. And in the long run, that'll be kind of the next thing.
This is why I'm not the CEO of Meta.
And maybe this whole conversation will turn out to be obsolete if like every tech company is like doing their metaverse play and growth is continuing. I'm skeptical of that. But that's the big question is like, if the metaverse turns out to be a big thing, then the growth story can continue. And Mark Zuckerberg will look appreciative. But at some point, I think there's only so many like types of computer interfaces. Like you can have one on your desk, one in your hand, maybe one on your face, but like there's not going to be like 5 more of those. And so either now or after the metaverse thing, there's going to be a point where there's just not a big next thing in like consumer tech. Google tried to do Google Glass 10 years ago. That didn't work out very well. Apple is rumored to be working on a VR thing and has been for years. So like every year that goes by that tech companies think that's a thing and it doesn't seem to be, makes me a little more skeptical. But yeah, I think if there's going to be a next big thing that kind of allows the growth to continue, it would be the metaverse. So far, it doesn't seem to be panning out.
When we think about these tech companies in Silicon Valley, sometimes I'd like to think about them as the supply. And then from a macroeconomic context, the demand for what they do comes from investors. And I wonder when you look at the course of, let's say, the last 15 years, what role both Wall Street, but also big money managers, big pension funds play in terms of what they are demanding these companies do.
So we had in the 2010s, we had this environment of very low interest rates and very high stock valuations. And when that happens, anybody who's managing a large amount of money wants to look for places where they can make riskier bets and potentially get a bigger payoff.
Because their normal bonds are like, nothing.
Right. Yeah. You get 2% or something off your normal bonds and you'd like to get more than that. And so they got very comfortable with this proposition that you invest in a money losing company, but it grows very fast and then eventually becomes profitable. And because it's so huge, it becomes very profitable. And, that only works though if there is in fact a profitable business at the end of the process. And I think they're just running out of those options. So I think it all depends on what happens in the future. I mean, if it's possible there are some future Googles and Facebooks being founded now that we just haven't noticed yet. And if so, it'll continue. But if that doesn't happen and it doesn't seem like it's happening, then I think institutional investors will start to learn that actually like VC maybe is not the like cash cow it used to be. And we'll see that industry shrink.
How much of this do you put at the feet of the Federal Reserve?
I think it's unclear which way the causation runs. I mean, the way it's supposed to work is when you cut rates, then the economy accelerates and then you can raise rates again because the economy is growing quickly. And the Fed was really trying to make that process happen in the 2010s and it didn't happen. And so was that the Fed holding rates down or was that the Fed trying to get the economy growing and failing? I think you can kind of argue it either way. What we have seen in the last couple of years, though, is that when Congress engages in stimulus spending, that really does work. And so one way you could look at it is that there should have been more stimulus spending after the Great Recession, in which case we would have had a faster growing economy and higher interest rates. But certainly I think the higher interest rate environment, whether you want to blame it on the Fed or on other factors, that I definitely think was a big factor in why we got the kind of market we had in the 2010s where companies were able to raise a lot of money and subsidize services in the pursuit of growth and not worry about profit. If interest rates had been high in 2015, it just would not have worked that way because it wouldn't have made sense.
You have this really interesting argument that I kind of want to spend some time with. An argument that maybe all of these layoffs might be good for workers and for the larger economy. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think if you've just lost your job, you might be willing to say like, F you, Tim. I don't agree with that.
I'm not sure I would say it was good for the workers per se. I mean, so Silicon Valley just pays a ton of money these days. And certainly if you're a Google engineer that's making or a Amazon engineer that's making $500,000 and you're not able to find another $500,000, I'm not going to say that's good for you. But there are many, many jobs in the economy for programmers at banks or manufacturing companies or retailers or any other number of businesses that just kind of do normal stuff and are not primarily in the tech business, but they have websites, they have software to manage their supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that those kind of companies have just really struggled to get kind of top tier programmers because those programmers can make more money at Google and Facebook. And the reason those companies were willing to pay so much money is because they were kind of in this land grab to get big market share in this, what they expected to be a very, very lucrative industry in the future, not so much because they're creating a ton of value like right now for customers. And so I think it's very possible that as these tech companies slim down a little bit, some of the very talented people that used to work at those companies will go work at a bunch of other companies across the economy and just make all those companies a little bit more productive because they're able to get better talent to make their computer systems better, their websites better, their internal software better.
But is going to work for, I don't know, some giant hospital system in the Midwest as sexy as it is to write code for Facebook?
Probably some of the programmers won't be that excited about it. I mean, they're not particularly fun jobs, but they are really important. So like my wife's a doctor and she doesn't particularly like the software that her hospital uses, but she would be a more effective doctor if their software was as like easy to use as Gmail or Google Maps. Like that would be great for her and great for her patients and like everybody. So I mean, I think it's probably not great for programmers per se, but I think it's probably great for the people that use the software that people outside the tech industry. Like there's just a lot of software outside the tech industry that's not very good, but it's very important that people really rely on. And if that became better over the next 2 years, that would be, I think, good for the economy as a whole.
And that does seem to be where, actually some of these big tech companies are thinking about their next move, right? Whether it's Amazon Pharmacy or some of these bets that Google has been trying to make on, say, big healthcare systems.
They are trying.
They have not been successful so far.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a very different thing because those kind of software systems, to do them right, you have to know a lot about the specific industry, about the pharmaceutical industry or, whatever it is. And I think that the big tech companies are used to kind of building their own thing from scratch and not so much doing a lot of like interacting and thinking about the needs of a specific industry. I think it's great that the big tech companies are going into those industries, but it's not going to be as easy for them to win in those industries as it is for them to do kind of in their home turf.
We've talked a bit about the allure of the next big thing, right? Everybody chasing whatever that's going to be. And I think for a while, you could probably make the argument that the next big thing was crypto.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a rough week for that. Do you think the FTX implosion takes the bottom out of that argument?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. So I've been writing about crypto since 2011. So and back in 2011, I was actually pretty bullish about it because it did seem like it could be the kind of thing where it could have could make big changes on the way that the financial industry works. And everybody's just been kind of waiting for like what's the like consumer application of this that like normal people will use. And you look at FTX. I mean, FTX had the Super Bowl ad, kind of basically saying like you're a sucker if you don't get into crypto. But if you think about what you were supposed to do with the crypto, what you were supposed to do was like gamble with it and like try to become wealthy. And like that's just like that's not ultimately creating any value. That's just you're trying to like, win by like trading against other people. And so like ultimately there has to be some like tangible thing that Amazon delivers packages to people. Apple creates like phones that are actually useful for people. There's no like thing that an ordinary consumer uses for crypto other than like gambling on it. And so for crypto to be the next big thing, I think we really do need to see like what's the tangible use case.
Is it time to toss out the next big thing rubric?
I think it might be. I mean, so one thing I've been thinking about is if you think about other industries that used to be kind of similar. So think about the car industry in the early 20th century. There was a period where there were a lot of new car companies being started. Cars got better much faster. A lot of fortunes were created. But then sometime, I don't know, around World War II, it was sort of that period ended. And there was the big three or big four automakers. And, it's not like those industries went away. They continue to be very big, important, profitable industries, but they just became normal industries that grew about as fast as the broader economy, and nothing that exciting happened. No huge fortunes were made. And I think, I don't know if it's going to be now or 10 or 20 years from now, but at some point, tech will be the same kind of thing where the consumer internet is just an established industry like all the others. And there's not a next big thing per se. I mean, I think in the broader economy, there'll be next things. There'll be probably the clean tech thing seems like it's going very quickly. Eventually, we might have, self-flying cars or self-driving cars. There's like other stuff, not kind of in consumer tech, but in consumer tech, I think at some point that'll just be kind of a mature technology where stuff doesn't change as much as it has over the last 20 years.
Make tech boring again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim Lee, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you.
Timothy B. Lee is a technology and economics reporter. He writes the newsletter Full Stack Economics. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell. Our show is edited by Jonathan Fisher. Joanne Levine is the executive producer for What Next. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate. TBD is part of the larger What Next family and is also part of Future Tense, a partnership of Slate, Arizona State University, and New America. And if you're a fan of the show, I have a little request for you. Become a Slate Plus member. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. We will be off on Friday for the holiday, but back next Sunday with a new episode. So have a lovely Thanksgiving. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening. This episode is brought to you by Best Buy. This year, let Best Buy be your holiday hype partner. Whether you're searching for exciting gifts, trying to snag the hottest holiday deals, or looking for ways to simplify the giving and receiving experience, Best Buy is here to help. Best Buy has the best assortment of impactful tech gifts, along with fast and free fulfillment options and great deals all season long. Maybe you're looking for an air fryer to help the aspiring foodie in your life unlock new recipes, or a new phone or camera for an aspiring filmmaker who's turning their passion into a side gig. Or you might be on the hunt for a new smartwatch to support a friend's wellness journey. No matter what you're looking for, Best Buy is your gifting destination for everyone on your list. And Best Buy makes it easy to get your gifts how and when you need them with free next-day delivery on thousands of items, as well as same-day delivery and in-store pickup options. Shop great deals on gifts now at Best Buy.